What's going on, guys? It's Tyler from Sideline Signal here, as always, with my co-host Andrew. We got a lot to talk about today. Some big news on the recruiting front as Bryce Underwood flips his commitment from LSU to Michigan. Hit me right in the heart. Really stunk, but we'll touch on that. Travis Hunter declares for the draft. Will he be able to play both ways is the question we're going to be asking. And then we'll give you our game picks. A great weekend of college football. Should be a lot of games that determine the playoff race going into the last weeks of the season. Andrew, how are you doing? Are you excited for today's episode?
Yeah, I'm doing great. This is it's been a wild day. About an hour ago was when the Bryce Underwood news broke, so definitely kind of changed up our schedule and our talking points for this episode, but I'm ready to go. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, number one quarterback in the upcoming class, the 2025 class, Bryce Underwood from Bellevue, Michigan, has flipped from LSU to Michigan. Very surprising, especially for me as an LSU fan, because I thought for sure he was headed to the Bayou. There are rumors that Michigan was offering a $10.5 million NIL package, and that seemed to work for him as well as it being his home state. So, Andrew, what does this commitment flip mean for Michigan? And then what does it mean for LSU?
I think it means everything for Michigan. Obviously, they kind of had that late push offering that NIL package, but we saw it in Michigan this year. I mean, they're 500. They've really struggled in Sharon Moore's first year, and a lot of it was because of the fact they didn't have a true talented QB1. And I think that it showed that they were willing to throw everything to try to get Underwood and obviously try to pull at the heartstrings that he's a Michigan native. You know, he lives a half hour away from University of Michigan. So it's definitely massive. And like I said in the TikTok that I made, I'm really curious to see in the next few coming weeks because early signing periods coming up, I think in 2 weeks from now, are we going to see a few more of these top level recruits in the high school class flip to Michigan and kind of rebuild that class because they couldn't really recruit that well based off the talent that they had this season because they've really struggled within Big Ten play and just overall this season in the way that they've played. So the fact that they're able to land a guy like this could potentially flip a few more. So I think it's great for Michigan. Sharon Moore is definitely smiling right now. I'm sure all of Michigan, outside of East Lansing are probably happy. But yeah, I think it's a massive play for Michigan. They're definitely going to probably be competitive next year. For LSU, though, it's a big concern. I was joking with you that maybe Nussmeier will end up coming back for a fifth year because he's a redshirt junior. But I think it's a big concern for Brian Kelly and the LSU coaching staff right now. Obviously, this season has not gone the way that they expected. Nussmeier hasn't played the way that they really expected. But yeah, it really felt like, especially with Brian Kelly, the one thing he could fall back on to kind of ignore the results and try to save his job was the fact that they had Bryce Underwood. And looking at it right now, I mean, what can you say for Brian Kelly to keep his job? I can't think of anything. That was kind of, like I said, that was his main falling back point because this is a quarterback. He's 6'4", 220. He had 5,000 career passing yards in high school and a little, I think around 2,000 rushing yards too. So he's a great dual threat and he's the number one player in the country. But yeah, I'm concerned in the inverse that I was happy for Michigan. I'm concerned for their recruiting class. I wouldn't be surprised if more guys leave, if they have some more guys flip their commitments in the upcoming weeks. But definitely crazy news. Like when Schefter broke it on SportsCenter, he was also shocked. But like I said, that 10.5 million NIL package definitely was on his mind. Also, along the fact that he lives a half hour from UMich, so a lot of things made sense. Heartbreaking for LSU, but I'm not really surprised.
Yeah, me either. I had an idea. Like I didn't think this is going to happen, but I'm not surprised by it. For Michigan, I'm interested to see how their offense changes. Because a guy like Bryce Underwood, you mold your offense to him. And he is not going to be a guy that you hand the ball off 30 times a game. So I do wonder if they move to kind of a spread look, or do they just keep him under center like that? I kind of feel like that kind of handcuffs him. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see. There's still a lot of time between whether or not he ever takes a snap at Michigan and now. But I do wonder how their offense changes. But this is a huge get for Michigan and Sharon Moore. Instills confidence in Sharon Moore's ability to recruit, to be able to field in Michigan and get the top guys in Michigan, which is big, which is something that Michigan hangs their hat on. Sometimes a team like Ohio State can come in, take some of the bigger guys out of Michigan, but Michigan being able to get that number one overall recruit in Underwood to stay is pretty huge. And then for LSU, I got a couple things to say. I'm going to rant a little bit here because it's ridiculous. LSU, so the recruiting class without Underwood is still good. They still got 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever. But I'm wearing a hat right now, and it's going to be backwards. But it says National Champions 2019, right? You can't sit back and tell me that this LSU team coming in with the recruiting class is expected to win the national championship. And that is my expectation for the LSU Tigers every single year. Andrew, I think you feel the same way with Oregon, right? Your expectation is to be in the race for a national championship. And what I'm seeing right now is that LSU is getting passed by other teams in the SEC. Alabama, Georgia's better than them. Texas is better than them. Ole Miss is better than them, even though they won head to head. Texas A&M is on the rise as well. LSU is not a middle of the pack SEC team. It's usually, and it was for the last decade, 12 years, whoever wins LSU Alabama was likely in the national title game. More than not, it was Alabama for sure, but LSU was always in that New Year's Six bowl kind of realm, big game. If they weren't in the playoff, they were in one of the bigger bowl games playing a premier matchup. And it's really disappointing to see that. I've always been a believer that we should have never fired Coach O. But it's not my decision. But you're right, Andrew. If BK is looking at himself, they're 6-4 right now. They still got 2 games that they could drop at Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. If they were to lose this one or two of these games, either end up 6-6 and 7-5, I don't see how Brian Kelly keeps his job. He's got to finish 8-4, and they got to win their bowl game in kind of like a stamp like manner. And then for their quarterback situation, I would bank on a transfer, which is something that they've done well, to be fair. 2 Heisman winners out of the transfer portal. Or Nussmeier coming back. I doubt that. Ricky Collins, who is a freshman, a dual threat quarterback, and then AJ Swan, who's a sophomore, who's supposed to be pretty good, kind of trying to step into that role as well. Shout out College Football 25 for me being able to kind of tell you their player profiles there. But they still have a chance, but I don't know if BK is really the answer at head coach. So that's really my thoughts on it, just kind of from the inside.
Yeah, and do you think this is going to ultimately be a wake-up call for LSU's just athletic department to show that it seems like they're slightly losing their touch within the SEC? Like you said, they're 6-4. They're struggling in conference. They're losing their top level commits that they used to get. So ultimately, do you think Brian Kelly just should get fired no matter what and kind of use this as a way that we need to have a total restructure and re-engagement of what we want LSU football to be?
Um, I do think that that needs to happen, but I don't know if it should happen right now. I think they should let him finish out the season. This is going to sound stupid, but let him finish out the season, play the bowl game, recruit the guys, get him here, and then if he loses that damn game at Clemson week 1, he's gone because I can't 6 straight years with a week 1 loss. That'd be ridiculous. You schedule these big games, you got to win them. If he doesn't win that game, he should be fired. I think there's a pretty good chance he gets fired this year anyway, because he has not stamped. Like you think about LSU's coaches in the past, Nick Saban, Les Miles, Coach O. What thing do they all have in common? First of all, a national championship. Second of all, they made their mark. You remember those guys. For BK's tenure, I can't tell you what moment really stood out to me besides maybe Jaden Daniels to Mason Taylor on a 2-point conversion to beat Alabama. That's really all I can think of, and that's one game. That is nothing accomplishment worthy in the great span of things. So I don't know. I think Brian Kelly's time has run out, but I don't think it should happen yet.
Yeah, it's a difficult position to be in, and like you said, the program seems like it's having a fall from grace from these legendary coaches that have delivered. Ultimately, just very disappointing to see. I know it hurts you more than it hurts me being an LSU fan, so you can only hope for things to get better. Who knows? Like I said, I think the biggest thing that people so far will remember from Brian Kelly's tenure at LSU has just been the lack of production and him getting angry in press conferences when they lose those week 1 matchups.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Unprofessional, quite simply. But that's neither here nor there now. His fate is in the hands of the LSU AD. So moving on. So we got big news from high school. Now we got big news in college. Travis Hunter says that he is definitely going to be entering the NFL draft and has tossed his name into the ring for the number one overall pick. He says that he wants to play both ways, both cornerback and wide receiver. So, Andrew, I ask you, do you think that he can?
It's very difficult because on one hand I say yes, and this is something we've talked about a little before. I think no matter where he goes and what position he plays, whether he's predominantly a corner or predominantly a wide receiver, they're going to have packages installed. Just why not? You know, if he goes to a team and predominantly is a corner, I'm sure there's going to be some personnel where he lines up out wide as a receiver. But do I think he's going to be able to play both ways the entirety of the game like he has in college? No, I don't think it's sustainable unless he just comes out and proves it. But he's a little too skinny for that, in my opinion. You know, the NFL is a completely different level of physicality than college and high school. He's been able to do it at a high level both in college and high school, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to maintain that physical stature and be able to play like 112 reps a game in the NFL. It doesn't seem realistic to me. Would I love to see it? Of course, but it's going to be difficult, and he's going to have to bulk if he wants that to happen. And I don't know. It's gotten to the point where I don't know which way again, it's very team dependent, but I'm unsure of whether he'll be, more of a receiver or more of a corner once he gets there. But he obviously is one of the highest touted prospects, and he's going to probably go within the top three, no matter what the order is.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. Just something that I want to point out is like, Charles Woodson, a guy that played both ways in college, ended up a DB, right? Jabril Peppers, a guy that played both ways in college, ended up a DB. There's a theme here, there's a trend. And I would honestly venture to guess that playing both ways for an entirety of an NFL season is harder than playing baseball and football in the NFL and MLB at the same time, which is something that Dion did, Bo Jackson did. But I honestly think that if you played both sides for the entire now 17 games, that would be harder. I really do think so. I don't think he's going to be able to do it just from a physical standpoint. Like, think about a quote from George Kittle stands out to me in the receiver documentary, I think, or it may have just been an interview where he's like, I get in 12 car crashes a game. Now, he's a tight end, so he blocks, he goes over the middle, he gets hit all the time. Like, there's never a play where he's not getting hit, basically. But cornerback, don't you think they're gonna pick on him? Like, imagine Travis Hunter across from DK Metcalf. And while I do think that he matches up with him athletically, size-wise, there is no way that I'm not throwing at Travis Hunter if the guy on the outside kind of is so much bigger than him. So that's really the issue I got. But if he gains 15, 20 pounds and he really thinks he can do it, he's going to have to train for endurance literally the whole offseason. I don't know if it would even be healthy, to be completely honest, to do it. But I think he could. It seems like he wants to, so why not give it a try? You're probably the greatest athlete in college sports in general right now. Uh, do whatever you want to do. But if the NFL team's like, hey, you're only playing DB or hey, you're only playing wide receiver, you better listen because that's also not something that's good, is demanding that you play both sides as well. But I agree with you. If he does end up on the defensive side, there are certainly going to be packages for him to line up at wide receiver. And I'd even say that they wouldn't hesitate to kind of put him in defensively, even if he was a wide receiver only, and kind of put him in packages where you need more coverage. But whole game, I don't think so.
Yeah, and kind of looking towards the draft, if he was to only play one position and just kind of playing the comparison game between the wide receiver class that's coming up and the DB class coming up, do you think he'd have an easier job breaking through in the cornerback class compared to the others that are projected to go high?
So I do think so. I think I can't even really name who's the top cornerbacks right
I
now
think
off the
I
top.
think it's I'm blanking on his name, but one of them's from Michigan. I know that.
Oh, I forget his name too, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I think Travis Hunter is pretty much cornerback one and wide receiver one. Maybe Tetaroa McMillan is higher up on some teams' boards, but I don't think many. So I do think it would be easier for him to break through at the cornerback position because there's a lot more talent at the wide receiver rooms for most teams. But I don't think it'll affect his draft position. I think he's a top three pick, as you said, either way.
Yeah, it was Will Johnson, just
Will
for reference.
Johnson.
I
Okay.
looked it up. Yeah, Will Johnson right now is probably the highest rated. But yeah, I agree. I think it would be easier to break into those corner rooms, and it's going to be interesting because there are a lot of talented receivers in this class. So I wonder where Travis Hunter would fall in this draft had he been a one position only kind of guy in college, whether it be he was a lockdown corner for Colorado or just that, wide receiver one, where he'd be in the mock drafts. Because obviously, one of the biggest reasons why he's so high is because he's been able to play both ways so well. So, going to be interesting, like I said, comparing him to like Tetaroa McMillan and like Luther Burden. Uh, even some of the other guys that aren't looked at that highly in the draft, like a Tez Johnson. It's very interesting to see. But yeah, I still, like I said, I think he'll be a top five pick no matter what.
And it will be interesting to see if teams kind of view him as one way. I do wonder if he ends up slipping in the draft because someone's like, okay, he's just playing corner or he's just playing wide receiver, or we only view him like that, and that two ways is somewhat impossible. So that is a storyline that we'll keep track of heading up to April in the draft. But really interesting, and I'm happy to say that he's going to be in the NFL. I'm really excited to see wherever he goes.
Definitely. It's gonna be a fun one to watch. But moving on now, let's break into our games of the weekend. A lot of games that could potentially have massive consequences on the already chaotic college football playoff committee rankings and the college football playoff as a whole. Starting off, we are going to go to the SEC, where it seems like there's always crazy shakeup. We're going to start Ole Miss at Florida. Florida coming off that win over LSU. They go back to the swamp, take on Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin. Your initial thoughts on this game? Do you think it's competitive? Who do you think wins?
Okay, so this is a noon game at the Swamp, and we saw it last week where even though it was at 3:30, the Swamp is rocking no matter what time. It's going to get up for this game, especially since they can play spoiler, and it's kind of the last game where they can play spoiler because they play Florida State next week, and that's not exactly a barn burner. But we've heard Lane Kiffin rumors all year. I'm sure Billy Napier's heard them where Lane Kiffin's going to take the Florida job. Billy, you're gone, and Lane Kiffin's going to slide right in. And then I'm sure the Ole Miss players are just as pissed off about it as well. They're hearing, oh, their coach is your coach is going to leave because this program is better than yours and you didn't live up to the standard. There is two storylines in this game where with a lot of passion, a lot of anger. So I think this is going to be a chippy game. I think there's going to be a lot of fighting, and I'm going to take the Florida Gators in a huge upset, knocking Ole Miss out of the playoff picture. And I think DJ Lagway finds his footing. He had a statement game last week. He played really well on the ground and through the air. They were able to run the ball really well. The O-line showed up. I think that continues, and I think this game is going to be awesome. And I kind of think that I'm going to be watching every single second of it, can't be unglued from it, even with the top five matchup in the same window. So I think this is going to be really exciting. I think DJ Lagway breaks out, and the rest of the SEC has got to get ready for this kid because Florida is going to be no joke with him in a full season next year. But I think Florida gets it done, and they eke out a win, and then it sends shockwaves. And I can't wait to do a video on Saturday if that does happen. But I'm going to go with the Gators.
That's a crazy pick. I tend to agree with you a little. I think it's going to be a closer game than people think. I don't think Ole Miss or Florida blow each other out. Like I said, I think it's going to be competitive from start to finish. I'm going to go with Ole Miss, though. I think, like you said, Lagway could easily have a breakout game. This could be the one. He is an insanely talented athlete. He's already proven it in the little bit of the season that he's played so far. Obviously, he was splitting earlier in the season, but since he's taken over as a starter, he's really shown a lot of potential. But the thing for me is, like you said, I think the trenches are going to be the most important part of this game. The O line showed up last week, but this is a different D line than LSU's. Ole Miss, I would say, probably had the best D line in the country or a top three D line in the country. And, they were able to do it against Georgia. Carson Beck was constantly under pressure. So looking at it, I think Georgia's offensive line is better than Florida's. So that's going to be the key, matchups for me is if Ole Miss's D line can get through and Lagway's constantly under pressure, I think he's going to struggle. I think Jackson Dart's going to have a big game in terms of passing yards. He always does. How can Florida limit him? Again, keep him under pressure. If the quarterbacks are under pressure, this game is going to be tight. But I just think, with the way that the SEC's gone this year, they're going to try to get as many teams in. And I think this is a game that Ole Miss could win and probably should win. So I'm going to go with them. Lane Kiffin will get it done. Like I said, I think it's going to be by 7 to 10 points. Real close one, comes down to the wire, but I like Ole Miss just a little bit better.
I like when we disagree because that means it's going to be a good game. Moving on to probably the biggest in terms of the numbers next to the teams. Number five, Indiana travels to Columbus to play number two, Ohio State. A lot's to be said. If Indiana loses this game, will they be in? Will they be out? Is the resume good enough? But this game's got a noon kick at the shoe. Andrew, how do you see this game playing out?
My heart wants Indiana, but my soul tells me Ohio State. It was really interesting to hear too. Some of the people in college football during the committee rankings suggest that Curtis Rourke should sit this game so that they don't risk a Jordan Travis injury. I think that's ridiculous. But it's interesting looking at it either way from the outside perspective of you could make a case that this is a potential eliminator for both these teams. Because if Ohio State's sitting at two loss, and obviously it might be a little hypocritical that we have all these SEC two-loss teams, but then we look at Ohio State, whose losses would be to number one and number five, and be like, oh, they could be eliminated. I don't think Ohio State would be eliminated if they lose this game, and there's certainly a conversation there. But I think Ohio State's going to get it done. Like you said, it's at the shoe. Signetti's had an impeccable first year, and I still think that there's a conversation for Indiana being in the playoffs, although their resume is horrible if they lose. But that's if it's not a blowout. If Ohio State blow them out, it's a lot tougher for me to consider them safely in. But yeah, I again, Ohio State has an impeccable defense. It's hard to break through. I mean, you could see Oregon's one of the best teams. They are the best team in the country. They struggled against that Ohio State offense for a portion of the game, although it was 32-31. It was, their defense played well. So, what is Curtis Rourke going to be able to do against this team? That's the biggest question. And I feel like that's always the big what if when you play Ohio State in these big upset potential matches or just big matchups as a general. It's how the opposing quarterback can handle the Ohio State defense. It's the same thing every year. If they can get in a rhythm and get the ball moving, there's a chance for Ohio State to be beat. But if Ohio State start the game off with like an early sack in the opening drive, I don't think it's going to be a close game. If the defense can continuously get the Rourke and make him throw like tight coverage passes, he's going to have to force the ball or chase the game. I think they're going to lose. So, like I said, as much as I want to see Indiana win this game, I just think Ohio State matches up better and they're the better team on paper.
Yeah, I agree. I want Indiana to win just for the sake of it. The Fighting Sigs, man, I want them to be in. I want them to play in the Big Ten title game as well. I think that would be fun. But no, no, I think Ohio State covers even. They're minus 13 right now. I think they cover, but the game is competitive. Just simply, if Ryan Day is even a quarter of the coach that he's supposed to be, they win this game by a lot. From a talent standpoint, it's not even close. You have a home field advantage. This is the biggest challenge in front of you right now. If they make the Big Ten title game, even if they lost, I think they should be in 100%. You lost to one team in the country and you're going to get punished for it. So this is really the big hurdle. I think they destroy Michigan next week, and it's not even close, especially after all these years. I know we'll talk about that next week. Maybe my mind changes based on this weekend. But I think the game's competitive. My key, obviously, Rourke, how he's going to do, and how their line does against that great Ohio State D line. But it's going to be the Indiana defensive backfield. Think about all of the talent that Ohio State has out wide. Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, Travion Henderson out of the backfield, Quinshon Judkins out of the backfield. They got everything. They have almost an NFL caliber, kind of wide receiver room. All of these guys are going to be top 3 round picks, and both of their running backs will probably be day 1 or 2 picks. So it'll be amazing to see. Like if Indiana can keep up with them on the outside speed wise, they got a chance. If they can make this kind of a slop fest where one team wins like 21-14 or like 21-17, that's ideal. Ohio State would do better in a shootout. So Indiana's got to be able to keep the points down, no turnovers. The turnover battle is going to be huge for a team like Indiana. You cannot have those mistakes. You have to make Ohio State feel the pressure because honestly, all of the pressure is on Ohio State. Indiana is not expected to win this game. If they come in, they play loose, they got a chance. But I don't think it happens, and I think Ohio State covers.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I think they cover too, but something we'll get into it more next week. But I'm more concerned if I'm an Ohio State fan for the game than I am for this one. And I don't think they're going to overlook Indiana or make any assumptions of what kind of team Indiana is, but I think Michigan in a rivalry game would have a better chance to beat Ohio State than Indiana do this weekend. That's all I'm going to leave it at.
Wow, that's a bold take, but
It is.
obviously we'll see.
Yeah, we'll like I said, we'll get into it more next week, obviously for rivalry week. But yeah, that's going to be the game of the week. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think all of the country expect Ohio State to win, but I think a lot of the country also want Indiana to win it. Going to be a fun one to watch. Hopefully, it's not a blowout. Moving on to another game, this time in the Big 12. We weren't going to highlight it, but this team just keeps on finding a way to win. And they're taking on a team that has everything to play for. And yes, we're talking about Colorado when they traveled to take on the Kansas Jayhawks, who have won back-to-back games against ranked opponents, beating BYU on the road and beating Iowa State. This game's going to be crazy. Do you think Jalen Daniels and the Kansas Jayhawks have it in them to get another upset 3 weeks in a row?
I mean, I have made money on them the last 2 weeks. And it was live bets, yeah. And I looked at the odds for this game, and it is the same exact odds as last week. And last week I was sitting there like, Kansas won 3 games. Why are they only plus 115 on the road at BYU? And it's the same thing. This game's at Arrowhead. There's going to be like no one there. I would assume that Colorado's going to have basically home field advantage. For that reason, I think that Colorado wins. I think it's a one possession game. I think Jalen Daniels balls. I think Kansas for some reason woke up and whatever, and they might be competitive in the Big 12 next year. But you know, it's a season of what ifs. We talked about this multiple times already. If they didn't slip up early in the season, they'd probably be in the conversation for the Big 12 right now, based on their resume. But I think this game is super close. But Shadur and Dion and Travis Hunter, they escape with the W, keep their hopes alive, and just pray that our next game that one of those two teams loses, or I guess one team specifically loses more than the other. But I think they get it done. It's super close, and it's going to be entertaining, even though you wouldn't think so.
I disagree. I'm riding with my boys. I'm riding with the Jayhawks.
Whoo!
I really like what Jalen Daniels brought in the last 2 weeks. I think this Kansas team is hungry. They know, hey, they've squandered their opportunity for any kind of prestige this season. They need to win out to make it to a bowl game. I'm taking the Jayhawks, baby. I love the energy that they have right now. Taking on that BYU team last week, they didn't let up. And that's the thing is I think this is a game where Kansas easily could be overlooked by Colorado. Yes, you have to respect them a little, beating Iowa State and then BYU back-to-back weeks, but this is a game I could easily see Colorado just overlooking them. And I think talent-wise, you could probably make the case Colorado's a better team on talent, but you can never count out a hungry team because Kansas believes in themselves now. Like I said, they win their last 2 games. They're bowl eligible. That's what they have left to play for. They already proven they beat 2 teams that were atop of the Big 12 at one point this season. They're hungry. I think they get it done. Again, I think it's close too, but I could see it again, just like a last second field goal, tight game. Because they were able to limit what BYU is so good at. They're able to move the ball, and BYU just couldn't move the ball. Like it was funny because I was texting in our group chat during the Kansas BYU game, and I had the worst commentator's curse ever. Right before the half, BYU has this immaculate 2 minute drive down the field. Easy as day. It's first and goal, 30 seconds left or so. I text in, man, nobody can stop BYU's 2 minute drill. It's insane. as I hit send, Retzloff throws a pick in the end zone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like Kansas in this matchup. I have the faith that they'll be able to get a third upset in a row.
Wow. And that would be awesome, to be completely honest. It strikes me a lot. Like instantly, I know Colorado's not the number one overall team or anything, but do you remember that one year, Brandon Whedon, they go to Iowa State last week of the year, 3-8 or whatever it is, and Iowa State wins, knocks Oklahoma State out of the national championship at the time, and it was just insane. That is kind of what is going on now, obviously with the expanded playoff. But Colorado, man, everything you want is right in front of you. You got to take care of business, and it's going to be huge. And we've seen this. One last thing before we move on. We've seen Colorado be mentally weak. They have not been mentally tough. Specifically, last year, we saw it a lot. They played down to teams like Stanford, Colorado State. And then this year, the Nebraska game, Shadur leaves before the game's even over, and terrible body language. So I do wonder if Kansas gets up like 7-0, 10-0, if they kind of fold under pressure. I think Dion's going to have his guys ready, but it is something to mention.
Definitely. It's going to be interesting, and yeah, but I think it depends on the nature of how the game goes, because if Kansas try to get in Shadur's head, I don't think it's going to work, because you can't make a guy angry in a motivational way. You can't get him fired up to be like, let's go beat these guys badly. But if you can just whittle away at the game, hit him every now and then in the pocket, make it hard for him make some bad passes, go 3 and out a few times, and just keep chunking away and taking the lead, that's going to plant the seed. But if you give him any, fuel to the fire, he's going to run with it and he's going to burn you. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Kansas approach this game.
Yep. And moving on to the biggest Big 12 game of the weekend has huge implications for Colorado. Number 14, BYU dropped all the way 8 spots out of the playoff picture at number 21, Arizona State, who went from unranked to 21. And if they were to win this game, they'd almost be like where Colorado is right now. That game's at 3:30 Eastern time in Tempe. Andrew, who you got winning this game?
I'm going with Cam Scattaboo, Kenny Dillingham, and the Arizona State Sun Devils. I just really like the matchup. I don't think BYU is as good as people think they are at defending the run. And if you can't defend the run to a T against Cam Scattaboo, you are going to lose the game. I think BYU's reeling after that loss. It's their first punch in the mouth. That's their first loss of the season. They were believing in themselves, but now they have that step back, going on the road in a high pressure, basically winning in, losing your done game. I don't think they have it in them. I think this is BYU of past BYU's. They start off hot, they look like a competitive team, and they choke it away. I think Kenny Dillingham has this team fired up. Can Cam Scattaboo get over 200 rushing yards? If he does, they win this game comfortably. I think he does. I'm taking Arizona State.
Yeah, I couldn't be more on the same page with you. I think they're going to win. I think Sam Levitt is going to have a great game for quarterback. Obviously, Scattaboo as well. Oh my God, one of my favorite running backs. Just the guy, no gloves, nothing on the arms. Most games I've seen him. I think they played a rain game and he had that, and he just looked like a big lumberjack, like some guy that should not be a running back. And he's just so good. He runs so violently, and I think that works for ASU. Retzloff, he's played well. I don't think he plays badly. I think this is a shootout type game, but I'll take Arizona State because BYU, all of the pressure is on you, buddy. You lost one game, you lose this game, you're out. That's how it works. Arizona State, they're like, no one thought we were projected to go last in the Big 12. No one thought we were going to make it. So they're playing with house money right now. A possibility to be a top four seed. Probably not. They'll probably be the 12th seed if they got in. But that is amazing from Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham should be considered for Coach of the Year, to be completely honest, because this was a team that everyone thought was going 3-8 or 3-9. Definitely not 8-2 at this point, which they are at. And I think they take care of business. The field gets stormed, and there's a lot of fines sent Arizona State's way, but it's worth it. I've been to that stadium. I was going to go there if I didn't end up playing college football. It is beautiful. It is going to be rocking, and it's going to be like 75 degrees. It's going to be beautiful weather as well. I'll take the Sun Devils.
Yeah, I think the biggest matchup that I'm curious to see is just how Darius Lassiter plays for BYU. If Lassiter can get into the game and get into a rhythm, constantly beating DBs, I think this game's a lot closer and it might go in BYU's favor. Same thing, it depends on how Retzloff plays. But if Retzloff can hit Lassiter maybe 10, 11 times in this game, I think it's going to be one of those comes down to the final drive. But if he doesn't get going, I think Arizona State will run away with this game, pun intended. Cam Scadaboo, the goat. But yeah, I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. But has a lot of implications on the Big 12 title game, so we will be watching that one closely. Another
And
game that I will be watching closely, our second to last game of our, little preview for this episode. I'm going to set the scene. A team that has no expectations at the start of the season goes on this miraculous run versus a team that is always looked at as a top team in the country, have a minor setback early on against a very mediocre team, but finds a way to keep winning. We're going to Yankee Stadium for number 19 Army versus number 6 Notre Dame. Who do you have here?
I love, first and foremost, let me say, I love the military. Thank you to all that have served. Thank you to everyone that has gone to West Point and defended our country worldwide. But I'm gonna go with the Fighting Irish. I really want to say Army. I really do, because I think it would be so fun to make a team like Ohio State play against the triple option in the playoff. I think that'd be sick. And I want Army to win this, but no. If you watched Army, or sorry, excuse me, Notre Dame Navy earlier this year at MetLife, uh, Army's got to play perfect. I said that with Navy. Army's got to play perfect. Bryson Daly, their quarterback, their star, is kind of banged up. He was questionable. He's missed some games down the stretch. And I think Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, defensive coach, they've obviously drilled in how to play the triple option because they were damn near perfect against Navy. And obviously, Navy fumbled a lot, threw interceptions, muff punts, all that. But I don't think Army does that, but I still don't think it's that close. I think it's closer. Obviously, any game is closer than what Navy did against them. But I don't think Army wins. I think Notre Dame takes care of business and kind of struts their way into the college football playoff. But go Army. I'm still rooting for you, even though I picked Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm going with my family ties. I have to. I'm going Army. I will never root against the Army team. Raised in an Army family. Do I think that they will? It's going to be tough. Like you said, they have to play a perfect game, and it's hard to get a feel for this game because Navy was the only comparable game they had, and Navy had 7 turnovers. So while Notre Dame played a fine game against them, they were handed the win. They didn't have to do anything. They basically, Navy beat themselves. So it's hard to kind of see how this game's going to go. But the ultimate thing is, if Bryson Daly is fully healthy, I think it's going to be a really competitive game. I think, I just have the faith in the Army, my boys, my second team. I don't have a lot of analytics because I don't feel good about this pick, but I have to go with the familial ties. Give me Army. Again, if they can stop Riley Leonard from, running, just being, if they can contain him, I think it's a close game. If they can get an early pick or, force a fumble early on and kind of run with it, it's going to be a fun one to watch. Although with both the service academies, they're not built to play from behind. If they go down 14-0, it's going to be hard for them to win this game because they're going to have to chase. They're going to have to do something they're not familiar with because that's the great thing with the triple option. It's just a time waster. They'll win every game 10-7 and they will be happy. I mean, against North Texas, Army had a drive go 13 and a half minutes, ending in a touchdown. So, yeah, they're really not built to chase. I hope they get the opening coin toss, take the lead, and just run the football. So it's going to be hard. And like I said, do I think Army will win? I want them to. I'm going with them, but it's going to be a tough path for them to do it.
Yeah, certainly is. And chaos, chaos, chaos. That's what Andrew and I want at this point. At least I do, because there's no shot LSU makes it now. So chaos. Would send in some chaos. We need it. It is well needed. Also, something to note, I have seen forecasts that we could get here. I'm in New Jersey, about 40 minutes outside of New York City. We could get anywhere from a foot to an inch of snow tomorrow into Saturday. So that might be worth it. I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. Could be freezing rain, could be slush, could be snow. So that will affect, and that kind of benefits Army, as a triple option team. So that is worth noting there. So on to our final game. We got an SEC matchup with a team that is underperformed, but it still has some tricks up their sleeve versus a complete juggernaut murder ball team, as we've been seeing. The number seven Alabama Crimson Tide are traveling to Norman, Oklahoma, to play the Sooners at 7:30. It is a night game on the road. It's an SEC game, one of the newer additions, obviously. So, Andrew, how do you see this game going?
I'm going to take Alabama, but if this is not the definition of an SEC trap game, I don't know what is. A night game in Norman with a struggling team that really doesn't have a lot to play for against a team that has everything to play for, both title berth and playoff berth. Like I said, I think Bama will win this game. Jalen Milroe is going to come out. He's going to have a great game. Ryan Williams is going to have a great game. Bama will probably coast through this. But if anybody can knock him off late, I don't think Auburn beats them in the Iron Bowl. I think this is the game they have to worry about. I think Oklahoma and Brent Venables have something lined up, something under their sleeve to try to get this game won. They've had a really disappointing season. There's no other way to put it. They've had, issues with quarterback flipping between two, but this feels like a trap game to me. I'm going to take the bait, though. I'm going to walk into the mousetrap. I'm going to take Alabama to win by 2 touchdowns or more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually think it's probably going to be somewhere between 20 and 30 that Alabama wins by. And I got two words with a hyphen, three words for you. Joyless murder ball. Joyless murder ball. Oklahoma's defense has not proved anything to me. I have no reason to think that Alabama's not going to run for 400 yards. Jalen Milroe, four rushing touchdowns, like 150 yards, and they just get the running backs, Jam Miller going and everyone in the backfield there. They have so much talent. But if Oklahoma were to, I agree with you. I'm more worried about this game if I was a Crimson Tide fan than I am about the Iron Bowl, because you really don't know. Brett Venables, if he wins this game, he keeps his job. If he loses this game, he probably loses his job. That is worth noting. I don't know who's going to play quarterback. Obviously Jackson Arnold's the starter right this second. But if he has a bad first drive, Michael Hawkins comes in. Two different quarterbacks completely, so you got to prepare for both. I think that DeBoer will have his team ready, and I don't think there's going to be much that stops Alabama heading to Atlanta. But this is the game that scares me, because Auburn has just been horrible. So the Sooners have the best shot. But if you're gonna swing at the king, you best not miss. So you got to play a perfect game, just as Army needs to against Notre Dame. So that's kind of what I see. I think Alabama kind of dismantles them, just runs the ball down their throat. But who knows? And I would love to see an Alabama loss.
Yeah, this is pretty much the last game for Oklahoma to kind of prove why they made the move to the SEC. People thought they'd be competitive, and they haven't been in this first season, but a win here could be the staple reason of this is why we're here and we belong here. They got to get it done, but it's very unlikely. Like I said, I agree with you. I'm taking Bama.
Yep. So anything else you want to kind of cover and get through before we end up?
I'm good right now.
No, I got an exciting slate. Obviously, harpoon to the heart. Bryce Underwood, you are banned from ever talking to me again. Terrible. Breaks my heart. But this has been another edition of Sideline Signal. I am Tyler, of course, always joined by Andrew. Thank you for coming on, Andrew. Obviously, we're available on YouTube and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe, follow, like, comment, do everything. We love responding to everything. We are also on TikTok at Sideline Signal. Remember to follow. We post daily content reflecting on everything, from college game picks to NFL news to everything like that. So make sure to follow that as well. Thank you guys so much. And remember to watch some football this weekend. We only got a couple weeks left before we get into bowl games. So we got to enjoy it. So thank you guys for listening.